A quarter of a century old, and still twice as fast as any other airliner in the world. We're about to fly faster than sound on the flight deck of Concorde. Even today, it's a shape that still seems to belong to tomorrow. The classic delta wing design that looks every bit as fast as it flies. Concorde is still the only supersonic airliner in the sky. The fuselage may seem narrow by the standards of today's slower wide-body jets, but since 1976, there's been no quicker way to travel. London to New York in just 200 minutes. Lunch in the air, and you're almost there. We're on the flight deck of British Airways 7 p.m. service to New York. Doing the driving is Captain Jock Lowe. He's been flying Concorde since it first entered commercial service in 1976. In the right-hand seat is co-pilot Ken Snell, and behind them, flight engineer Alan Walker. A flight crew of 3 is comparatively unusual in airline operations today, but when Concorde was designed, it was normal. In any case, the myriad of complex systems make the flight engineer an absolutely indispensable member of the team. The crew are carrying out the pre-flight checks. Especially important for an aircraft with no tailplane to counterbalance it in flight is the C of G, the centre of gravity of the aircraft when fully loaded.
Okay, I'm with you now. Okay, just run through these and load sheet we've checked. Zero fuel weight, good CG.
Zero fuel weight, 88.4, C of G 51.99.
Yeah. How many aircraft weight?
91 tons, 179.35.
Check. Yep. Load limits.
That's set.
Data we have delta, the weights are good. Okay. Start clearance we're waiting for. All of that.
Concorde will weigh 179 tons on takeoff. The passengers and luggage weigh only 10 tons, but it takes 91 tons of fuel to get them to New York.
Yeah, okay, start clearance. We have door lights, master warning you've done, anti-collision lights. Okay, throttles, then engine feed pumps, and it's your engineer.
The ground tug is connected up to manoeuvre Concorde onto the apron. After leaving the gate, Captain Lowe carries out a routine familiar to every pilot, checking his flight controls for full and free movement. At this point, the nose of the aircraft, the famous droop snoot, is in its upright position. Once away from the terminal, the brakes are applied before the engine startup sequence begins.
Okay, ground, the brakes are set to park.
The nose visor is lowered to provide a better view of the ground while taxiing. In the engine start sequence, the 2 inboard engines are fired up before the outboard pair.
Okay, that is 4 good starts. Many thanks indeed for the push, ground. Can we see the thumb of the
Outside, the ground tug controller, just a few feet away from Concorde's 4 Olympus engines, doesn't hear the co-pilot.
Hello, ground.
Okay, ground, if you did hear, thanks very much indeed.
Okay, I'll have 4 and 1 engines then. As I was doing, we have reset. Okay.
As the ground tug unhitches, the crew go through the after-start checklist. With all systems operating normally, there's clearance to begin taxiing to the runway.
West on the southern 4-9 right. Yes, sir.
Concorde's nose wheel is more than 60 feet back from the tip of that needle nose. As the nose wheel rides the bumps in the runway, on the flight deck there's the slight sensation of sitting at the end of a springboard. At the holding point, just short of the runway, Captain Lowe takes the opportunity to have a quick word with the passengers before takeoff.
3 understand after departure, right turn, heading 240.
Captain Lowe once again. I'm sure you can tell we're at the holding point for the runway. There's just 1 aircraft to take off ahead of us, and then it'll be out. Thank you. Okay, before takeoff checks, please, Alan.
Before takeoff, Charlie. Briefing takeoff data.
No change other than the heading is 240.
Landing right.
Off track, taxi turns are on, Alan.
Transponder.
Okay, everybody ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, ready. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Full throttle. With afterburners glowing, Concorde accelerates down the runway. The crew monitor the gathering speed.
Airspeed building both sides.
RSAF.
Concorde is now hurtling along the concrete, accelerating to its takeoff speed of 250 miles an hour.
V1. Rotate. V2. Gear up, please. Coming. Turn 240 knots.
Next comes the countdown to switch off the afterburners on the command noise.
3, 2, 1, noise.
Up to now, Concorde's nose has been in its takeoff position, drooping at an angle of 12 degrees. Now both the nose and the windscreen visor are brought up into their position for supersonic flight.
Down to visor nose.
Okay, nose and visor coming up. Go.
Restoring Concorde's streamlined shape has the immediate effect of cutting fuel consumption and reducing noise on the flight deck. The idea of developing an airliner which could fly faster than sound, a supersonic transport, grew from separate research carried out by both the British and French aircraft industries in the 1950s. Independently, BAC and Sud Aviation were coming to similar conclusions about the ideal design. Choosing an engine wasn't difficult. The Olympus engines on Britain's Vulcan bomber could be developed for the job, and the Vulcan itself used as a flying testbed. Choosing the shape of the wing was the problem. Model after model was tested to find a shape which could fly at 1,300 miles an hour and land at less than 300. The experimental Handley Page 115 had the answer. Separated airflow moving across its delta wing gave that elusive low-speed lift. Now the race to build the first supersonic transport was on both sides of the channel. The British called their design the BAC 223 and the French the Super Caravelle. But the risk and expense was too much for either government. In 1962, Britain and France signed a binding joint agreement to collaborate on building a single design, and it was an agreement which was to be unbreakable. The deal was a triumph of Anglo-Gallic compromise. 60% of the airframe was to be made in France, the rest in Britain. 60% of the engines and nacelles were to be British, the rest French. Complete aircraft were to be assembled simultaneously in Bristol, England, and in Toulouse, France. The Olympus engines were built jointly by both Bristol Siddeley and Snecma. Whilst almost everyone argued over what to call the new aircraft, French engineers double-checked British calculations. French designs were reassessed by British teams. Getting it right became not just a matter of professional pride, national honour was at stake. Each country was to build one prototype and one pre-production model. The first, 001, took off from Toulouse on its maiden flight on March the 2nd, 1969. The second, 002, took to the air 5 weeks later from the airfield at Filton, Bristol. In 5,000 hours of flight testing, every system and backup system was checked, including the 4 different ways of getting the undercarriage down. The politicians of the day seemed confident of success.
Sur des lignes commerciales. Cette performance way, the first. And behind this great achievement lie the work of tens of thousands of dedicated scientists, engineers, designers.
But there were public protests over sonic boom and government concerns about money. Originally, the whole project was budgeted at £140 million. Now the costs were spiralling upwards. Meanwhile, the airlines were decidedly lukewarm. Production models were being built, but there were no orders. The lineup of unsold Concordes made an impressive sight and sound, but now American public opinion was being orchestrated against Concorde's sonic boom. Landing rights in the USA were restricted, and there was worse to come. Conflict in the Middle East pushed the price of fuel to levels which made it impossible to buy and fly Concorde at a profit. The only customers for Concorde were the two national flag carriers, Air France and British Airways, which acquired 7 and 8 respectively under special arrangements. Those 15 aircraft were the only ones made. The construction jigs were scrapped. It was the end of the production run. But it was not the end of the story. Concorde began flying fare-paying passengers in 1976, and it kept on flying. Gradually, it carved its own unique niche in the air transport market. And then something happened which no one ever expected. With all the development and acquisition costs written off, Concorde began making money. It now flies at a profit every day. Back on the flight deck of our British Airways flight to New York, we're getting ready to go supersonic.